Yes, thank you. Thank you also for allowing us to talk to you today about a topic that is very close to our heart. First, as a little heads up, unfortunately, our third speaker, Minja, can't make it today because she'd fallen ill. So the two of us, which is Barbara, UX writer at XING Events, and me, Leonie, art director at XING, we're going to take over her part respectively. So, okay, our topic today is all-inclusive, how we pushed accessibility at XING. Fantastic. And now we have the first hiccup. Let me try again. Sorry about that. Yes, fantastic. Okay, so today we would like to take you along on our journey to a more accessible and inclusive XING. And it is a journey, by the way, one we're still on and still finding new pastures and pathways. We will show you how we set off, how to find travel companions, all this cool stuff we learned, and including all the pitfalls we came across, so maybe you can avoid them later, and all our gains and new horizons in terms of accessibility. So we'd ever be so pleased if you joined us, and who knows, might become a new travel companion in the future. So first, let's talk about our accessibility itinerary. We're going to talk about how we initiated change and which challenges we faced on our trip, so you can get started right away and maybe better even. Then some tips on how to win people over and what issues we tackled and what we can pass on to you to convince your peers. And then also some strategies on how to get moving, how you can talk to the locals in order to communicate the topic of accessibility better, and what you can do basically today already. First of all, accessibility. What do we mean by that? In our very own understanding, we mean that everyone, and we mean everyone, has the autonomy to use a product on their own terms without any external help, but at their own pace and on their own term. That's at least our definition. And as you may have noticed, diversity has become a huge buzzword in recent times. I mean, buzzword may sound a little dismissive, but it is a good thing, because everyone is talking about diversity nowadays, and it also already has led to a lot of awesome initiatives. However, to us, accessibility is a bit more than that. It is about inclusion. And we believe that in a few years' time, inclusion as a term will even replace diversity. I mean, if you look at those two bowls, the diversity bowl, it looks really, really good, doesn't it? I mean, it's very colorful and bright and looks super healthy and kind of Instagrammable. Well, we gotta be honest, to us the mixed inclusion bowl tastes even better. But first of all, a plot twist. We don't really talk about accessibility today. What? Nor do we want to convince you into thinking that accessibility is a good thing. We kind of assume you're already on board with the idea. I mean, we don't really believe that anyone thinks accessibility is a terrible idea. So we keep that apart. But let me explain why it's not really accessibility we're talking about. In a recent workshop with one of our UX teams, I had a quite enlightening switch of perspectives. We were talking about situational accessibility issues as opposed to permanent accessibility issues, because situational accessibility issues can affect everyone, not just people with disabilities. There's a couple of examples as shown on the chart. For example, if you have a baby on your arm and you want to use your phone, you can only use one arm really, and you may have slightly divided attention, so you're also facing cognitive obstacles when using a product. Or maybe you forgot your glasses at home and you can't see very well that day. Or you're on the train and can't really play sound and might need captions to watch your video. So the list goes on endlessly. There's so many possibilities where everyone can face accessibility issues. So I asked every team member in which situation they may have already faced a situational accessibility issue. Now, when the team started thinking about the situations, more and more examples came up, which made me think a little bit. Like one, for instance, was I saw the menu on the canteen displayed, but I couldn't figure out where I can get the meals actually. Now, wouldn't we probably rather file this under usability issues? I wasn't sure, but then it makes perfectly sense that they saw those issues that way. When I don't understand or can't properly use a product, in which situation whatsoever, because that doesn't matter to me, I want to use it whenever. Would product designers say, yeah, you like the abilities? Would they ask me to fix my brain, learn more, get good? No, of course not. A good product designer would fix the product, make it usable regardless of the circumstances a user is in. As Amin Hassani from the startup Blue Art Hero has so beautifully put it already, fix the product, not the people. Another example, if your children want to play basketball with their friends, but they can't reach the hoop because it's NBA height, it's super high, would you go straight online and order them leg extensions? No, of course we are not. You would hang the hoop a little bit lower so they can enjoy the game. Again, fix the product, not the people. And it's exactly the same with people living with disabilities. If you look at India Weatherspoon from the US, she was born without fingers on her left hand. To her, not having fingers on her hand is normal. That's what she's used to. Pushing her to get prosthetic fingers or like a robotic hand or something would feel weird to her. Instead, the startup Blue Art Hero set out to patch up a pen in a way she can use it again. And voila, finally she can write her name with the left hand by simply using a little device to click to a wristband. Again, the inclusive approach here is fix the product, not the people. So in conclusion, a good accessibility is not just a nice to have or a tagged on extra for bleeding hard do-gooders. It's simply a matter of good UX, a universal design approach that serves all users, whether they live with disabilities, have temporary obstacles, or simply have their phone on mute. Good UX serves everyone, every step of the way. It will improve the overall user experience for everyone, and we fully believe this journey will make us all better UX designers in the end. So, after this prelude, I'd say we hope you're on board with the idea of it all, because we're setting off now, and we would like to take you along to show you all the wonders we've come across. XING, we had formed an accessibility guild roughly 5 years ago with just a handful of very passionate colleagues that wanted to make a positive change for our users and also change mindsets within our company. And they would very proudly, or us, we're all part of it, by the way, would proudly show you some of the souvenirs that they had from their recent trips. You know, useful souvenirs, not the ones that just gather dust, you know, the ones, but really cool goodies we picked up along the way and which might help you get a first glimpse at how educational our travels already were. So first of all, we had a look at low-hanging accessibility fruits. We started incorporating these right away into our daily work whenever we could. We had a look at what can we change right away, what doesn't take too much effort, but what is something we can tackle already. And some of them are still work in progress, I have to say, but it is progress. For instance, we had a look in our design at colors and contrast, for instance. We strive to make color not the only form of visual distinction, for instance, because people with color blindness maybe can't distinguish between the two. So we try to add shapes, icons, text, different hues, etc., something that helps them distinguish between the elements. And with the introduction of our new design language, we made sure that the contrasts comply with the AA standard as a minimum. So the AA standard is like a worldwide accessibility standards in terms of contrast and legibility. In our case, that also meant we eliminated color copy in order to improve legibility for our users. We also had a look at text structuring in our code. So basically, if, for instance, blind users who are using screen readers to navigate the content, they can't really distinguish between a headline and just bolded text if it's not tagged properly. So we made sure that headlines are tagged as such, for instance, with an H1 tag, so that the screen readers can recognize it and convey it to the users accordingly. Then another thing is alt texts or alternative text, which are like a little bit of an image description you can put behind an image so that screen readers can read out to the users what's actually conveyed in the picture. For our marketing teams, for instance, we made it really easy for them to incorporate alt text into their emails by adding a little feature into their email tool. And now they can just add alt text at a few simple clicks. So it made it really easy for them to start right away. And also we are exploring alt text, like in terms of what helps the story of the whole medium and what doesn't. Then we also had a look at plain language. Like, first of all, we strive for writing to be understood, not just to impress. We're trying to use easy words and also explain jargon or technical terms where necessary. Then we also write in shorter sentences and paragraphs and not create these huge walls of text. Like, we structure them more. We make sure they're left aligned because it's easier to find your line after the break, and also structure them more and break them up with subheadlines and bullet lists so that you don't have this huge wall that's really hard to digest. And the copy team is already working on XING-wide guidelines to help all teams at XING write in plain language. These are just some of the improvements and initiatives we have already started implementing, and there are hopefully many more to come.
So thank you, Leonie, and yay, right? You might think the Accessibility Guild at XING really had an impact. They are up there, they are sharing their insights, they have formed a knowledge group, their teams are starting to raise accessibility topics, and they start making their product usable for everyone. But this almost didn't happen. No way! Well, yes, it almost didn't. Because when we first started off, we found ourselves in the middle of intricate roadways without clear traffic signs. There were numerous intersections, hurdles along the way, dead-end streets. And we took a couple of wrong turns. Actually, we had wrong assumptions all the way. But as we now know where to go, or even better, where to start the journey, we want to share our learnings so you can have a better takeoff. And I'll give you a list of things to start with, a list of things we would have liked to know. And I'll also tell you where in the journey we took some wrong turns. I'll tell you about our wrong assumptions so you can do better. So how should you start? Start by talking about it. Start by talking about accessibility in meetings. For example, in meetings with your team, with other teams, with leadership, or with your peers. And if you think, I don't know what to say about accessibility, try to ask questions. You could ask, what about accessibility? Or, is this screen reader friendly? Or you can say, did you think about accessibility issues here? And look around and see who's interested. Because if nobody talks about it, you might think you're the only one to think about it. And you might be afraid you can't change anything. So the first suggestion is talk about accessibility and see who's interested. The second thing to start with, when you've found other people who might be interested, gather them, get organized, form a group, and you can name your group. You could name your group as we did Accessibility Guild, or Accessibility Forum, or Accessibility Cycle, and set regular dates to discuss the topic. But you can also decide to work asynchronously by communicating via your common channels, because it doesn't always have to be meetings. And if you found your group of people, also consider talking about internal accessibility issues, like raising awareness in the HR department and push for a more diverse hiring. Overall, it should consist of a bunch of people who are interested in the topic, have a little time for it, and know where they can discuss and share info about accessibility. Thirdly, and most importantly, educate yourselves. There are heaps of sources available online. You've got social media platforms where people publish about accessibility, articles, online workshops, paid and free ones. You've got talks in any language. Read and listen and share your knowledge with your group. That's the 3 simple things to start with. But back to our start and back to the car, because I still owe you the story about our wrong assumptions. Imagine all of us sitting in the car, buckled up, happy faces. Let's go, someone said. And someone else, but where? And that was the first part of our unsuccessful takeoff. We thought, which was wrong, we thought we'd have to drive up that mountain to get higher management on board. Look at that mountain. It's our metaphor for higher management. So we drove that way up that mountain, taking those winding roads, because we thought we'd need them on board. We thought we'd need their experience, we thought we'd need their money, and we thought we'd need their approval. But we never arrived. The thing is, we shouldn't have asked for top-down buy-in to start our accessibility movement. That was a wrong assumption. And our learning was, just start. People usually aren't against accessibility if it's for free. And starting your accessibility journey is for free, because accessibility is an important topic. We invested a lot of time and energy on discussing who should talk to management, which board member would be the most open, which department should own it, and what we'd need budget for. We actually even discussed where to get budget from without even having concrete topics where we would need budget for. And in the end, nothing happened. The buy-in was just nothing we should have asked for in advance. But we have leadership teams getting interested now that they can see how big our movement is, how many people we united, when they realize that we've already achieved stuff and we've already improved features and that we are capable of changing processes and products. So what about the second part of our unsuccessful takeoff? At every stopping bay, at every intersection, and at every stop, we would wait a bit. We would wait for someone to help us and to rescue us. Someone who knew already, because we were afraid we weren't enough. We were afraid we didn't know the road well enough, which we didn't. But that also lost us time. Have you ever heard of imposter syndrome? If you haven't, it's the feeling of inadequacy, the feeling of not being good enough and not knowing enough. And what have we learned? Stop looking for an expert before you even start your accessibility journey. Really, as I said before, just start. Find people. Find your group of people. You can look for them at the stopping bays and intersections, because once you've started a movement, some others might want to join as well. Then find resources, ask questions, and educate yourself and others. You will realize you don't have to find an expert when people start asking you about accessibility, because you know your way around the company and about the topic. And please don't get me wrong, there are real accessibility experts out there. And at one point, your company might and probably should decide it's time to hire one of them, or even better, they might support you in becoming an accessibility expert. So the second learning, having a real expert in a team is just not something you need when you start off. And all of this boils down to one thing. Every journey starts with the first step, and that's a bit cheesy, but just start. Now back again to the car and our road trip, because as we said before, it's a journey. And a journey is not only about the destination, but also about the trip itself. So it's about the mood, the vibes, the mindset. And that's why I also want to talk to you about the mindset of your little group of accessibility newbies and share 3 tips. Before I said, just start. And now I go a bit further and I say, done is better than perfect. Consider yourself on a learning journey where you need to apply what you've learned. And as it's better to get things done rather than contemplate and wait, there's a fair chance you'll also find yourself stuck in a dead end. And if you end up there, you should tell yourself and everyone involved, it's okay to make mistakes, like we did. And if you find yourself in such a situation, try to find a way out. Go back where you started, or find someone who can help you navigate. And the last mindset tip I want to share, consider it a fun ride. And try making it fun along the road. I'm thinking about the best road trips. Listening to music, singing along, playing the I Spy road trip game. They were better than the ones where I fell asleep. And how can you make your accessibility trip fun? You could try gamification, like an Easter hunt for accessibility issues in your product, or a group learning or research groups. Or you can have a screen reader test. And we started thinking about it when we prepared for what is known as Hack Week at XING, where we get time to work on fun projects we bring up ourselves. And this time we will work on accessibility topics, and we will try to make that fun. So all of this, the tips on how to get started and the tips on your mindset, all of this combined will result in this picture. First, the water might seem cold, the waves might seem too high, and the view scary. Then you will learn, you will adapt, and you will have some experience, and you can prepare. And at one point, you will ride that accessibility wave. Because then you will have read so many articles, you will have learned so much about accessibility and talked to so many people that you know how to surf those new spots. And that's when you can inspire others and win them for your accessibility journey.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go to the next round of tips on how to inspire others outside your small little accessibility community. And when I say inspire, I also mean make sure they listen and agree and are convinced that accessibility is a topic to be tackled. So the first thing is a little bit of a no-brainer, but I'll say it anyway. Make accessibility accessible by feeding it in snack-sized bites. You could, for instance, summarize the research and articles you've read and publish it in your internal channel. Or you could ask for 2 minutes at the end of a meeting to raise awareness about the topic and just start a conversation. For instance, you could also forward interesting stuff to people who might be interested, what you found, or suggest them to sign up for a newsletter that you like. It should be easy and quick for them. Easy in terms of a few clicks away or just an email to open, and quick in terms of the time they need to invest. So don't send them like a whole encyclopedia already, just little articles and chunks that they can really easily digest, so it's much more likely that they'll bite. Another important step is explaining why accessibility isn't just for a small group of people, but for everyone. And that really helps you spread the word and get others on board. The curb cut effect is a really good example. Cutting the curb, which in German is this beautiful word, Bordsteinkantenabsenkung, has been created for people using a wheelchair initially. So it's been created for people living with disabilities, but it's actually good for anyone. I mean, anyone who's ever rode a bike can tell that it's so much better to use those instead of the huge, the bigger curb. Or like being on roller skates, skateboards, walking aids, or people pushing a pram. Another thing is when explaining to others why accessibility is a good idea and to create empathy is to make it more tangible. Like try using metaphors to explain it to people. There are many powerful images around, for example, to help people understand how chronically ill people tend to manage their time and energy in comparison to healthy people. You can cite the spoon theory. If you don't know what the spoon theory is, I wholeheartedly recommend you Google it. It's a really, really powerful way of conveying what it's a little bit like in their everyday lives. Or you could also cite the Blue Balloon Challenge. I've got one right here, that's mine, which raises awareness of how difficult it is to balance the ups and downs of everyday life with type 1 diabetes. So basically, whenever I go to work, to sports, meet friends, I always have this blue balloon of type 1 diabetes with me, and I always have to take care that it doesn't get damaged, lost, or anything. So that can also be a really powerful image to create empathy with others. And then, of course, the last thing to keep in mind when it comes to make people to listen and agree is talking their language. I mean, try to emphasize with your target audience and understand what they need from you and what they're actually interested in. For instance, we did this by addressing people in regard to their department, discipline, and job role. So we tailored our very first Accessibility Guild newsletter to every department and set out different mailings for developers, for UX, for product people, and for QA respectively. So each newsletter contained very feasible and concrete first steps on how they in their discipline can incorporate those tips into their daily work straight away. Also, what we did is when we were talking to marketing, we would focus on entirely different points than we were talking to product or to UX. Know what makes people tick, what is important to them, and what makes them hesitate, and always have a good point to the contrary prepared. So if there's some blockers in their head, it's always good to know a counter argument. Well, and that's already everything we've learned condensed in a very brisk 30 minutes talk, but there's one last thing we would like to pass on as well. And that is, it's very good if you want to find like allies or stakeholders that you want to convince. It's good to come to them prepared. You know the elevator pitch concept. It's really good when you meet someone and just have a minute, a window of opportunity to talk to them about accessibility. It's really good to have a little elevator pitch prepared. And I would like to challenge you now. Today's the day. Start right away by preparing your very own elevator pitch. And you can use, for instance, these three steps. So first of all, write down your target group. Who are the people you want to talk to and what is important to them? Then select one metaphor to explain why your users will benefit from accessibility. You can use the spoon theory or the blue balloon challenge or any other metaphor that makes it more relatable, more tangible. And in the third step, you can also try to anticipate what blocks them, what makes them hesitate, and anticipate those things and find counter arguments for that. Like, we often face the same questions like, is it really worth it to invest in accessibility? How many people are even affected in our target audience? Are there really that many users affected? Nobody can force us to introduce accessibility. And I have to say to that, there is a law coming, so they may want to reconsider that stance. And what are the numbers? So is it cost effective? And there are plenty of great sources online you can find where you can find exactly the numbers that you're looking for. And we found that the numbers are always a lot higher than those people with their doubts anticipated. So it's really worth it to do a little digging and a bit of research to find the numbers. So bottom line, any time is a good time to start. And if in doubt, start bottom up. So that's it from us. If you want to come have a chat afterwards, of course, we're now available for questions. And if you want, you can contact us on XING. These are all profiles where you can find them. Always approach us. We're always happy to talk about the subject and yeah, come and have a chat.